Adam Engst on the Apple Watch Ultra, the new AirPods, and more. This is Mac Voices. Today's Mac Voices is supported by Mac Voices After Dark. Uncensored, off-topic, and always off the wall. Mac Voices After Dark is available as a benefit to our Patreon subscribers. Sign up at patreon.com/MacVoices. Welcome to Mac Voices. This is the talk of the Apple community, and I'm Chuck Joiner. Folks, this is part 2 in a 3-part Mac Voices session we did with the Long Island Macintosh user group and Adam Engst. In this edition, Adam talks about the Apple Watch Ultra, the new AirPods, and a whole lot more. Let's go back and let Adam and the group do the talking.
As I said, it's all too easy to either make a stupid mistake or not even make a mistake. Just bad luck. Bad luck things happen. People get hit by coconuts on the head. Stuff like that happens. So it doesn't have to be your fault. So it just anything that can do that, and the fact that Apple just built it in is nice. And the more they do that, I think the better. I think that's you want to talk about helping humanity in a small way. That's one of those ones. And you never get to use it. All the better for you.
As someone in the insurance business, I never want to use my homeowner's policy, but it's there, to protect.
Precisely.
So let's use all this as a transition over to the Apple Watch Ultra.
Mm-hmm.
Again, this seems to be.
I want to buy one, but I want one.
Yeah, but so is this an aspirational product? Is it a practical product? Does it address the needs? Is it, how far out to that extreme sports fringe does it go?
So, yeah. Okay. So the problem is that there really is, it's actually priced really well. $799 for an Apple Watch. Keep in mind you're paying, what is it? $499 for the $399, $499 for the Series 8. And so, it's more, there's no question, but it's not, it's not silly more. The rumors were like, it's going to be $1,000. And so it's expensive and it's big. And it's got a lot of really cool features. It's sort of the Swiss Army. It's like the Swiss Army watch. The only problem with it is, and Garmin had a little kind of snarky tweet about that, which someone pointed to, is like the $1,000 Garmin Extreme Sports Watch, which nominally is what the Apple Watch Ultra is competing with. Well, they measure the battery life for that in months, not days. So, when they've got, I think it's 34 days of battery life for the Enduro 2, and oh gosh, I forget the number, something like 100 hours of GPS use. So it's just vastly better battery life. And when Apple was talking about how, we've got 36 hours of battery life, and we're going to have this extended mode that's 60 hours of battery life. And I'm thinking, that's still kind of a short trip. Like if you're actually an adventure or outside person, that's kind of a short trip. And you're going to need to bring something to charge. Plus, actually, those Garmin sports watches, extreme sports watches, they have solar panels built into them. And they will recharge themselves from the solar panels. So obviously they can't really recharge themselves completely, but they can get extended battery life from that, and that's pretty cool too. So like when you're talking when you saw the people in Apple's video, the mountain climber in the snow and and a beard and everything, and I'm thinking you just left. You don't have battery life to have been out there very long. So it's not quite, you got to the top of that mountain awfully quickly, because if you were actually hiking there for a week, you wouldn't be using your watch. And so that's, I think, the only kind of Achilles heel for the really serious people. That said, how many of us have SUVs that ever go off road, right? Realistically, as I put it in the article, it's for, extreme athletes, adventurers, and wannabes. and that's fine. We can all be wannabes. It's not a problem. there's no shame in it. It's fine. And so, like even for me as a runner, I don't do marathons or ultras or anything like that. So I actually don't need, significant battery life. I actually would really like, and this is why I say I want one, I would really like to have the action button on the other side, and I'd really like to have the brighter screen, because the two things that in my mind make the Apple Watch really inferior to a dedicated Garmin or other running watch is the screen is hard to read in sunlight, much harder than just a standard LCD. And it's very hard to control the screen when you're actually moving. So like when I'm running, I'm pushing buttons on the Garmin without even looking at it, that I'm taking laps as I'm running on a track, or I'm starting and stopping, right as I start a race and stop a race and things like that. So if you actually are serious about these things, fiddling with the screen is just not okay. I mean, it's really not. So that action button, which obviously we don't quite know how apps are going to use it, but every app can have their own function for it. That's going to be cool. So, we'll see. I'll be curious, for instance, if an app could use a single press versus a double press. Can you get two functions out of it that way? I don't know. And we'll have to see. And I did hear also that you can attach shortcuts to it, or a shortcut to it anyway. So you'll be able to have, custom program your own thing from the action button. So that's kind of cool.
Okay, so you may have already answered this. All right, but I feel like I have to bring it up. And Richard in the chat said whatever extreme market there is, Apple will capture a good percentage of it, and that kind of encapsulates my point. Is it fair to compare an Apple Watch with all that an Apple Watch can do? Because unless, correct me if I'm wrong, but this is an Apple Watch. I mean, it's an Apple Watch on steroids in some cases.
Yeah,
but it has
a superset.
But it has all the features of Apple Watch that have made it so popular and make you and I and everybody on this call want to wear one. So is it fair to compare that to one of these dedicated devices that has a very dedicated but very small group of users?
Well, I mean, it's a question though, because the stat that came out is actually the most, the company that has the largest percentage of the market share for watches, smart watches over $500 is Garmin. It's not Apple. So. Okay. Fact is, it's not necessarily a small market. And, I'm sitting here, with my Garmin Forerunner 645 that I put on my wrist on my other wrist, along with my Apple Watch whenever I go running. It's a better experience. And this, I'm writing an article about it now, so I just looked it up. This with the screen thing is actually a running dynamics pod that's, you clip it to the back of your shorts, and so you get running dynamics out of it that are more accurate than when they're on your wrist. And so the combination of those things 2 years ago cost me less than $300. So that's why I say, it's a little bit of a tough, and this is why, like I said, I want an Apple Watch Ultra, but I think I'm not going to buy one, because why would I replace a $300 watch that works perfectly and does everything I need with an $800 watch that that I think is cool, but I don't think will do anything really any different for me, especially because I already have a Series 5 that's also fine. So, I mean, you see the point. It just starts to get, you start to get into these kind of interesting questions of, like, if I was buying something from scratch, I didn't have an Apple Watch, I didn't have a Garmin. Yeah, okay, that the Apple Watch Ultra suddenly starts to make sense. But if you're already using something and upgrading, that's when it starts to feel like, oh wow, is that really worth that much more? Is it going to give me that much more? And that's what I had trouble with. Was it worth $800 to, in my case, really basically get to test it? So. If Apple sent me one, I'd wear it. Don't get me wrong, but it really wasn't a situation where I didn't think it would actually change my behavior in any way.
Okay, forgive me. I'm not trying to win the argument. I'm just pointing out.
Oh, come on, Chuck, let's go.
Well, okay, all right. So does your Garmin do AFib tracking? And can your Garmin make a phone call? Because this new, they made a point of saying, where are my notes? What, 2 microphones, 3 microphones, or second speaker?
Right, 2 speakers, yeah.
Yeah. So that's where I'm struggling. I'm not saying that the Garmin doesn't have a place, but trying to compare. Sorry,
but I will say, like, again, the Garmin is for running. I mean, I actually have the Series 5, which does have AFib tracking and could make a phone call if I was willing to pay for it, which I'm not. And so again, it does come down to, if you're starting from scratch, you can look at the Ultra and go, wow, that gets me enough of what I would want from the Garmin and of what I would want from the Apple Watch in a single package. Therefore, it's worth it. I mean, I probably did spend pretty close to $300 to $800 on the 2 watches, right? But once you have one of the watches, then it becomes a harder decision. Because so I'm just saying that it's a trickier thing, I would argue, than for most people, just because it's expensive enough for something that's less. I don't want to quite say this, but like, the iPhone is important. Like, you really need an iPhone at this point in the world, and you don't need an Apple Watch. So.
Okay. I'll go. Well, I'll go with that, but I think that the Apple Watch, I mean, they continue to add value from a health perspective, and now from a safety perspective, that it is becoming something that I know I've recommended it to plenty of folks who have older parents, because of the fall detection.
If I had heart issues, so being which I apparently do have heart issues. I actually did have a quote unquote event while sort of mountain climbing about a month ago. I passed out on the side of Whistler at 7,000 feet, and turns out my heart problem is that my heart goes too low. And the watch did not actually tell me anything about this, but I got to enjoy a great deal of, as it turns out, completely unnecessary medical care, where it turns out I did not have a heart attack and I did not have any other problems, but I don't know why my heart went down to 35. So I'll know more in another month when I get to actually talk to a cardiologist. But absolutely, if you have any kind of situation where you're thinking about cardiac stuff, I would strongly recommend an Apple Watch. I don't know if I'd recommend the Ultra. I think for most people, the SE is all you need. If AFib, because AFib is a whole other thing, right? I mean, you can just do the heart rate stuff with the SE. AFib, if the Series 8, it's a great machine, no question. And what I'm really intrigued by, not personally for the first ones, but is the temperature sensor, right? In the Series 8. Because Apple is completely focused on cycle tracking, which is great. I have no quibbles with that whatsoever, except for the fact that I have also no personal use for it at all. What I'm really interested in seeing is, and people have suggested that this is probably an FDA scenario, is, well, if you can actually tell temperature and you can tell heart rate, you can probably, and blood oxygen, you can probably start diagnosing or at least warning people about a variety of illnesses. I mean, wouldn't it be great if it told you had COVID or even like, hey, you might be getting sick. Start thinking about that. And so, because a lot of times you don't really quite feel sick until like all of a sudden you're like, oh, wow, I feel terrible. Like, it wouldn't have been nice to know before you started the day that this was going to be, this is going to be a trouble. So I think that's where the temperature sensor is potentially going to go. I don't know how long it'll take Apple to do that. They've already got, and there's been lots of research on it during the COVID times of, can you predict, whether someone's got COVID by looking at temperature? And so I believe the answer is yes, they can, but getting that packaged up in a way that the FDA will approve is a really tricky scenario.
Or is there a way around that? That's sort of what Apple's been doing, that, okay, these are not FDA approved things, consult your physician, consult your pharmacist, consult, somebody. Well, but here's a hint that maybe something is a little out of
Yeah,
bounds.
I mean, again, the cycle tracking stuff makes a ton of sense. I remember, 24 years ago, Tanya, taking her temperature every morning for a little while, and that sort of thing, and because that's what you did, and so it makes, and that's not an FDA kind of situation, but simultaneously, gosh, every new version of watchOS. For the longest time was, and we now have, AFib approval in Turkey or in, Greece or something like that, because clearly Apple had to get permission from whoever the FDA equivalent is everywhere in the world. And, look, Apple's huge. They don't get any sympathy, but that's got to be a lot of work and a lot of fuss. So I think it's definitely one of those things which Apple is at least going to take very carefully. It will be interesting to see if they allow access to the sensor for other apps. And that, because it may be one of those things that Apple can't do, but other apps can do, for entertainment purposes only.
Right. I want to open it up to questions here, but before we do, I just want to ask any final thoughts or any thoughts on the last of the big announcements, and that was the AirPods Pro. I know you said they were boring before.
Oh, totally boring. But I'll take another pair anytime these boogies get out. So, again, the magic of what Apple's doing is really all in the fact that every one of these devices is a computer. So the AirPods Pro, a new H2 chip. I mean, they had the H1 chip before. And the H2 chip basically, with, again, just a little bit of physical changes in terms of what's in there, in terms of like the new drivers and a custom amplifier and things like that. They claim has better audio performance, and I'm not gonna argue. Usually Apple's pretty careful about that sort of thing. They're not gonna say something which is completely, people are gonna immediately accuse them of lying once it comes out. And again, what they're doing with that computational power is amping up the active noise cancellation. They claim, I don't even understand how to parse this, but 2x cancellation? I don't understand what that means. Do they cancel twice as much of the noise, or? Yeah, I don't know. But the point is the noise cancellation is better. And then transparency mode was kind of a neat idea, because so these AirPods, they have tips in them, so that they're sealing your ear canal. Sound doesn't get in very well. And so the transparency mode uses the microphone on the outside to be able to bring in sounds from the outside through that passive seal. So you can hear your music or your podcast or whatever, and you can hear the stuff from the outside. That's very cool. With the new H2 chip and the new AirPods Pro, what they do is they do the transparency mode, but they also hey, there's a guy jackhammering over here. In the video, and it was a guy. I thought it should have been a woman, just to be equal opportunity noise pollution. They were very good otherwise, Apple was, but I thought the jackhammer person should have been a woman just because. Basically loud environmental noises when you're in transparency mode, you don't want those coming through. You don't need to hear, like if you're in transparency mode in an airplane, you want to hear the person next to you talking. You don't want to hear the airplane. So it's adaptive transparency mode, they called it. And it sort of feels to me like a combination of noise cancellation and transparency mode. I think that's, again, utterly brilliant. Plus, hour and a half more battery life. How do you get an hour and a half more battery life out of something which, as far as I know, is exactly the same form factor, unless you're doing a much better job at the computational level of controlling how much power you're using. And so again, that H2 chip with its custom silicon, custom circuitry to do all this stuff doesn't need to use as many cycles as something which is more general and thus uses less power. So, better audio, better transparency, better noise cancellation, more battery life. And the charging case can now be found with precision finding if you have a U1 equipped phone. I forget which ones are U1, the Pro models recently. But so you're trying to find the damn thing in the couch cushions, and you'll be able to get it more carefully. And the speaker, the case has a speaker. I was thinking, they should really put a decent little speaker in here so you can use it as a Bluetooth speaker if you want to. But It's again, nice little upgrades. Price is the same, and it just replaces the old ones. So in essence, what it comes down to is at some point, if you have AirPods, you'll probably want a new pair, and you'll get these because they're great. So I don't really have any quibbles. I still do honestly like the original AirPods form factor a little better, but mine are first generation and got kind of wonky, so I end up using the AirPods Pro all the time.
Yeah, you did leave out. Where's mine? Yeah, you did leave out the lanyard.
Oh, the lanyard loop, of course, right? Basically. Again, really silly little easy thing, but if it lets you not lose the damn case, that's a really good thing. I mean, I think what Apple actually acknowledged is that the real problem with these is you leave them around, either the case empty or with them in, and it's super easy to lose this thing. And so the lanyard loop, the precision finding, the case having a speaker so that even if you don't have precision finding, you could make a sound. Just takes a lot of stress out. These things they're pretty expensive at $250. You really don't want to lose them.
This edition of MacVoices is supported by our Patreon subscribers and MacVoices After Dark. Ever wonder what happens before the MacVoices live shows? Or what happens when the show ends or after the live feed closes? That's where MacVoices After Dark comes in. If you are a Patreon supporter at any level, you get access to the video of our off-camera conversations. Uncensored, unedited, and always off the wall. It's a small thank you to our Patreon supporters who want to peek behind the curtain. Become a Patreon subscriber at patreon.com/MacVoices. And thanks to everyone who supports the show.
Oh, that's an interesting point. Brad's saying you can't use the old case for the new pods. I didn't know that. Huh, okay. And it's perhaps not too surprising. Maybe because the new ones do have also a touch control, so you can change the volume by by stroking the stem very gently. You can change the volume. Sorry.
Glad you said it and I didn't.
Had to put that image into your head, Jack.
Yeah, so, it felt like there were a lot of nice little improvements. Yeah. I agree with you, and the one thing that I have not seen discussed, and I'm kind of surprised, is the demo with the girl walking out in front of the jackhammer and taking out an AirPod, and then you obviously hear the jackhammer. She sticks it back in, and it all goes back to where very, very quiet. And it's like, okay, that's a pretty impressive demonstration. Was that intended as a demonstration or as an explanation of the capability? I'm waiting to see.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see. I mean, it's just, again, I'm a country mouse, so I don't spend time in cities. But I have to say, I see a lot more people wearing earbuds. I mean, I'm near Cornell University, so a lot of students, and man, they have their freaking earbuds in all the time. So there is a certain level of, if you're going to have the things in, maybe they should be doing you some good, and transparency. The adaptive transparency. It's probably a good thing. I mean, one of the issues that we are running into is people, using earbuds too much and then having premature hearing loss. So, and Apple's actually put some effort into preventing that. And this, it might help a little bit more by, there are pretty loud environmental sounds out there. I have my watch set to warn me when it goes over 80 decibels for some amount of time. And actually, almost never happens. Just very every now and then. But again, I don't live in the city, so.
At this point, so before we run out of time, I want to make sure we opened up to everyone. So, folks, if you have a question, unmute yourself, please. I think
and wave,
yeah, or raise a hand or something. Yeah,
there, sure, Lynn.
Whatever.
Sorry.
Okay. Well, I saw Scott's hand up. So.
Oh, Scott was first. All right.
Yeah.
I preferred looking at Lynn. She's prettier. Sorry, Scott.
Anyway, this is for Adam.
Okay.
First of all, I have to tell you, when the times you came to us live, I always enjoyed talking to you and Tanya. It was so nice.
Well, thank you. I was telling people that, like I'm doing this meeting via Zoom, but I actually have been to LIMac. Are you in the same?
Yeah.
I guess you're not in the same place because you're not physically there. But are you having meetings at all in person anymore, or
not until
it was a New York NYIT Institute of Technology.
Yes. Yes.
I remember that. I remember that well. And we went. And we always we'd go out for Thai food beforehand.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
It will happen again. It will happen again.
Anyway, what I wanted to tell you is I really liked your article that you were videoing this car racing around the track. It was an article with video.
Huh.
And it was a thing where you thought you were going to run out of juice and you went and got something from the car.
Oh. So yeah, not car racing, track racing. I'm a runner. So yes, I was doing
that was running. I thought it was cars.
Yeah. I was timing a track meet. And so yeah,
okay.
What I do pretty much whenever I'm not doing tech stuff, I'm doing running stuff. So I'm the president of the local runners club, and I time a lot of races, and I organize the cross country teams and things like that. That is my thing otherwise. And yeah, so I did a big article on we have all this insanely old technology that all kind of ends up in a MacBook Pro that had gotten kind of old. It was 2016. And I've been using it for years, and battery died. So
yeah, and you can buy these. I've had them for a long time because I used to use them to charge the car battery. You can carry around, and it has regular AC plugs that you can plug into.
Yep. And that's in essence what I got.
I was going to email you, and I think I forgot. But anyway, the other thing is two very fast things. On this 48 megapixels, can you manually dial that down because you don't want to have such a large image?
So that's, again, what they talk about with the quad pixel sensor is that it will automatically itself, unless you stop it, it will dial itself down to 12. Because most of the time you don't need it. And again, with the computational photography that Apple's doing, combining those 4 pixels is an advantage. So 12 megapixels is really enough for most of the kinds of things you need. And so if you can get more data into that image because you've combined 4 pixels, particularly again with the computational processing, you can actually get better function out of it.
It gives you a very big file,
right? Without getting the huge file, right? And the big win is low light, right? Because the problem is it's getting enough light into these cameras. And there's a reason why lenses are big. They get more light in.
Well, I know. I was a physics
teacher.
Those
tricks. Yeah, all those tricks they can do to get more light in.
Yeah. And the other thing I wanted to tell you, when you were at 7,000 feet, I have a feeling that the altitude is what did it to you, because you're aware, I'm sure, that it's colder at 7,000 feet.
It was 46 degrees.
Yeah. And the other thing, though, is there's less oxygen at 7,000 feet. And so that could have done it.
That's all likely. That's the best situation. The best guess right now is it was sort of almost a form of altitude sickness. The only problem that we've run into is usually low oxygen and altitude and cold make your heart beat faster, not slower.
Yeah.
So because it's trying. So we'll see.
I live in Arizona now, and I was at the Grand Canyon stupidly in February, and I have asthma, and I had to go and get inside somewhere because I couldn't breathe.
Yeah. All right, Lynn.
Go.
Yeah, Lynn, you're up then, Jeffrey.
Okay. I had a question about a future iWatch. There had been some rumors the last few years about a glucometer, glucose meter.
Yes.
Is that ever going to be a possibility?
It's an interesting question. I don't know the science and enough of the science behind what Apple would have to do to get that to do that, because obviously, you're not. It's not going to just sit there with a little pin on the back pricking you all the time.
Right.
So it's something where they're going to have to be able to read something about the way light intersects. Goes through the skin and the blood vessels and whatnot and bounces back it's my own understanding of the only way they could do it to learn that, unless Brad may know more about that. But
actually, there is a technology that's been patented, and Apple is in conversations with this company that does that. It does a light, transmission, and it does a calculation. So they have their own product that does this sort of thing, non-contact. It does not puncture your skin. But Apple hasn't gotten there legally to do that. And of course, then they have to then engineer a new watch that incorporates that function as well. So it's something that they're looking to do. Obviously, it might be a good couple of years before we even hear some rumors that is showing some fruition. But they're working on it. If you want it available, I don't think there's a product yet that does it. It's about to come out as a separate product. Eventually, the watch will most likely add that at some point.
Okay,
my guess also is that that's something that even if Apple gets the technology working and whatnot, that is going to need FDA approval.
Absolutely,
I hope so.
So yeah, but you want it to have FDA approval, but that then takes time and effort and so, because it is such a big deal for people with diabetes to have accurate information there, so the FDA is going to be very, very intrigued by that.
But there's a lot of people with diabetes, so it will be very important for Apple to be able to offer that.
Yeah, and to not have to do the prick tests all the time would be great. So,
Right. Exactly. Thank you.
Yep. Okay. All right, Jeffrey.
Thank you, Bradley.
No problem.
I've just come back from a trip where I flew to Calgary and came back from Vancouver. And these little things, the AirPods this is in a 12 South case.
Yes.
Extremely useful. They made the flight a lot less unpleasant because now a lot of the airlines have a Wi-Fi bank of movies that you're able to connect your iPad or your iPhone into. And wearing the earbuds, I was sitting toward the back of the plane where it was very noisy, and put those in and the noise just disappeared.
Yes.
And the movie, I watched a couple of movies, very pleasant. The time went by. What an advancement. So
I've got a tip for you. Okay. Because we actually were in Vancouver in August, and so we're strange. Tanya and I basically always watch TV together. Pretty much everything we watch together, unless one of us is sick, and then we both have a few certain shows that we watch when we're sick alone. But so on the plane, Chuck's utterly flabbergasted by this.
Yeah.
It's family time, Chuck. Come on, get with the program.
Okay. I withdraw my question.
What are you? Some kind of So in any event, we loaded a bunch of stuff that we watch on Tanya's iPad Air, and here's the tip, which is that you can connect multiple pairs of AirPods to the same iPad, and then you can both have these in and each get the audio, and with separate volume controls, because it turns out Tanya's hearing's better than mine, so she likes the volume quieter than I do. Oh. And so this was actually really cool because we were able, it was a little fussy. It was a little fussy because I had to actually unpair my AirPods Pro from my iPhone and repair them to her iPad to get them on the same device. But it worked really well then because, I could have these in and at the volume my ears wanted, and she could use her AirPods at the volume she wanted while we're getting exactly the same audio from the single device. So, and it's just like, when you tap the, like in Control Center, you tap the speaker thing or you tap audio, whatever, you can just pick multiple devices, just like you would with multiple HomePods, say, or whatever. And it works brilliantly. So it's kind of a nice little feature for those of us who watch TV together, Chuck.
Thank you.
Wait. Just, I want to be real clear here before he tars and feathers me with something. I was not questioning that part. I think that's very nice. And,
oh, okay.
But The one that threw me was, that you each have certain TV shows you like to watch when you're sick. So, and that's the only time you watch them.
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay, I'm not going. I want to know what, and I'm not going to ask. So somebody else ask a question and get me out of this, please.
So I'll be clear. Mine are usually superhero shows. Tanya doesn't like superhero shows.
Yeah, Guy
so
Fawkes.
if I'm sick, I get to watch Supergirl or Green Arrow or something like that. But
okay.
That's one of the blessings of the new AirPlay 2, multiple destinations.
Yeah, precisely. AirPlay 2, multiple destinations. Thank you, Bradley. Let's change the topic. All right, who's next?
Please,
next?
quick.
Richard, I think
quick.
Richard's next.
Which
You unmuted,
Richard?
so we're calling on you, Richard. You got to come up with a question now.
Me?
Yeah, you're on the spot.
All right, I'll give you one. Your fascination with the Star Trek-y kind of Star Wars photonic.
The photonic
That
engine,
word?
yeah.
Actually, anybody old enough to have used a Nikon F with a photomic head would kind of know that word. And Rick. But that's having to do with a light meter that they added to an old Nikon F. You could, the head changed and you added the meter to the body. And that's how that works. So that's where that word kind of comes from, I think. I think somebody from Apple is old enough to know it.
It's hard to actually believe that someone from Apple's old enough to know that.
No, that's true.
I would almost believe they came up with it more from like the Star Trek angle. And someone like them is like, hey, someone like you saying, hey, did you know? And they're like, really?
Yeah.
I'm 16, so how would I have guessed?
Yeah, well, I'm old enough to have used a Nikon F with a photonic head, okay? So,
right.
That's what happened.
It's a leak that they're promising optical transducers in the next machines.
Yes.
And Richard,
and
you're never
at some point we really are into the whatever that, I can't remember the name of the overdrive in the DeLorean. What was it they lost?
Oh,
the Mr. Fusion.
It was in Back to the Future.
The flux capacitor.
The flux capacitor.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
We're pretty soon there's going to be a flux capacitor in one of these devices, and we're like, oh wait, finally.
Yeah, there was actually a reference to that in one of the Star Trek Next Generation. Yeah. It was pretty cool. They stuck it in.
Yeah. Richard, you were never. Yeah, before you do, Jeffrey, Richard, you're never supposed to say that you remember. You're supposed to say your grandfather told you about it.
Oh, okay. All right. That's true.
I'm trying to help you out here.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Adam Engst is back in the next edition of MacVoices to wrap up our conversation with the Long Island Macintosh user group. We finish up our conversation about the announcements from Apple's Far Out event, and we also take questions from the Long Island Mac audience. That's all next time on MacVoices. I hope we'll see you then. Until then, and as always, thanks for watching. Visit MacVoices.com for show notes and to connect with Chuck on social media. Get involved in our Facebook group or like our Facebook page, and get more out of your Apple tech with MacVoices Magazine, free on Flipboard and on the web. And if you find value in it all, consider supporting us through either our Patreon campaign at patreon.com/MacVoices or by making a one-time donation via the PayPal link on our front page and in the show notes of each episode. You will join these fine people who help bring you MacVoices. Advertising handled by Backbeat Media at backbeatmedia.com. Bandwidth provided by CashFly at cashfly.com.